The first stir of dawn tinted the horizon with faintly glowing embers, a gentle luminance that roused the seas around the ship's hull. These waters were neither placid nor welcoming. Thick fog tumbled across the surface, moving with a purposeful slowness, as though guarding that which lay beyond. Each day seemed scarcely different from the last to the crew of the Wayfarer, save for one person whose eyes gleamed with restless purpose. Charis, the eternal voyager, stood at the prow with her hands clasped behind her back, scanning the nebulous boundary of water and mist. Though centuries had passed for her, she still brimmed with an urgency that belied her agelessness. Rumors saturated the air like a lullaby of dread. The archipelago they sought was hidden in those very mists, a treacherous labyrinth known as the Forbidden Seas. The few who had ventured into them seldom returned, and those who did conveyed vaguely recollected horrors. But to Charis, the journey was inevitable. She was the last heir of a disgraced lineage, carrying a centuries-old burden that demanded atonement. The sea, vast and grimly patient, offered her the only path to redemption. Long ago, her ancestors had angered the gods of wind and water by capturing one of their mortal emissaries and forcing it to guide them across dangerous waters in search of secret riches. The family's success was spectacular and short-lived. In retribution, the emissary's spirit returned in wrath, cursing the bloodline to wander the oceans forever. Each generation was compelled to sail uncharted routes, pressed by an insatiable desire to test the boundaries of land and sea. But while her predecessors had chased riches and dominion, Charis navigated for a different cause: to break the cycle. The gods alone could set her lineage free, and rumor held that by crossing the Forbidden Seas, she might earn the favor of their guardians and end the curse. As she watched the fog swirl like phantom hands above the water, she felt the tremors of fear flicker inside her, but an irresistible sense of duty outweighed any dread. She could not flee from her ancestry. She was no longer just a mariner. She was a bearer of an ancient sentence. With a deep breath, she turned and gave the order to press onward. The ship creaked and groaned, sails straining in the rising wind. The crew bawdy, hardened souls, were in truth loyal to Charis, almost beyond reason. They owed her their lives and freedom, as she had led them out of countless near-fatal skirmishes with pirates and monstrous storms in her centuries-long sojourn. Yet even they questioned her. They heard the old tales of watchers in the mist, dreadful beasts that kept vigil in these seas, but their loyalty to her overshadowed their unease. They trusted that her knowledge, gleaned from lifetimes spent chasing cursed whispers, might guide them through. Soon the ship was swallowed entirely by the fog. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the swirling whiteness felt like a living creature. There was no sun to orient them, only an otherworldly murk. Charis felt the changes instantly. The wind's direction shifted unpredictably, the waves churned faster, and eerie sounds reverberated through the gloom. Rhythmic drips of seawater, the groan of the planks, and the faintest of echoes that seemed neither near nor far. The swirling mist parted for fleeting seconds, revealing glimmers of monstrous silhouettes prowling the edges of vision before vanishing once more. Night fell quickly, even though she could barely see the difference between day and night here. And with it came the swirling starlight overhead, dimly visible through the shifting haze. The rotating patterns of those unfamiliar constellations hinted that they had officially gained entry into the region of myths. Lanterns were lit around the deck, their pale glow little match for the swirling fog that clung to everything in glistening droplets. Charis made her rounds on the ship, offering comfort to the rattled crew. Some were clearly in the clutches of trembling dread, while others feigned obliviousness, throwing themselves into mundane tasks like scrubbing deck floors or mending ropes with excessive vigor. Sensing their need for a firm center, Charis recalled the lullabies of old. Softly, she lilted an ancient seafaring hymn, passed down in her family since before memory's dawn. It was said to be a conciliatory offering to the ocean's first caretaker. The lines told of a woman who yearned for freedom from the constraints of mortal life, and pleaded with the sea gods to carry her away to their realm. In her remorse for capturing the gods' flawless messenger, she offered her own life as recompense. Caris's singing voice drifted across the deck, a trembling beacon that anchored the men's hearts. Each word held more meaning than they knew. The ballad was more than an old song, it was a faint entreaty, an attempt at bridging a shattered bond. In the solemn hush of the night, the wind abruptly died, the sails drooped, deflated against the masts. The stillness was so total that Caris could hear the water lapping gently, as though coaxing them forward. An inexplicable surge rocked the wayfarer. From the blackened water, shimmering silvery shapes surfaced, then vanished beneath the moon's watery reflection. Someone cried out, pointing frantically, and the crew rushed to the rails. Dozens of razor fins broke the surface, circling the ship. They seemed to glow, as if made of mother-of-pearl fused with pale moonlight. The illusions were so fast that no one could focus on them. Suddenly the entire ship shuddered again, and the fins disappeared once more, yet the disturbance did not abate. The water stilled momentarily, but then roiled into a swirl of upheaval. A colossal, serpentine figure rose mere yards from the ship, its black scales reflecting the lantern light. The creature's eyes gleamed with an ancient, storm-like intelligence. Water cascaded from its ridged spine, forming rippling arcs as it towered over the wayfarer's mainmast. A hush settled among the crew as they witnessed what they believed was a manifestation of legend, the guardian of the seabed, rumored to haunt the threshold of the forbidden seas. Its body moved slowly, hypnotically with regal grace. The creature's stare swept across them, halting on Caris. She sensed its scrutiny running deeper than just her outward appearance. That moment seemed to stretch until a guttural moan reverberated from the beast's throat, echoing across the silent way. The guardian bowed its head slightly, then retreated beneath the water, leaving stillness in its wake. Confusion and awe rippled through the crew. Some trembled, others let out quiet gasps of astonishment. None could have expected that such a fearsome creature would appear, only to vanish again, with no combat at all. Caris's heart pounded as she realized the presence had acknowledged her specifically. She felt a surge of conviction. They were meant to press forward. She gave a short command, urging the sailors back to their tasks. The watchers nodded mutely, adrenaline pumping through their veins. By dawn, the ship approached a passage that, on their charts, led to a cluster of islands bound by forbidding reefs and swirling undercurrents. As the fog slid away, the region revealed itself in quiet splendor. Towering cliffs rose like faceless sentinels from the sea on either side. Moss clung to them in thick carpets, and waterfalls cascaded down their faces in shimmering ribbons. There, at the narrow inlet opening up before them, Caris glimpsed the fabled archipelago, a scattering of rocky islets crowned by ancient trees contorted by wind and time. Sailing into the channel required skill, for razor-sharp reefs lurked just beneath the surface and the water was churned by unpredictable current. Despite that, Caris pressed onward. Each wave resonated with an electric tension, as though the ocean itself had eyes fixed upon them. With expert maneuvers, she guided the wayfarer between looming outcrops of stone, narrowly avoiding a reef that would have gutted the hull. The crew exchanged worried glances, some whispering prayers to any deity that might grant them safe passage. Eventually, they docked against a rocky ledge that provided marginal shelter. The men dropped anchor, scoured the ropes, and peered uneasily at the twisted forest rising toward the sky from the island's core. Caris, however, felt the stirring call of fate. She had read about this place in centuries-old records, deciphered cryptic star maps, and now stood on the brink of a place rumored to be uncharted by mortal cartographers. She gathered a small landing party and ordered the rest to defend the ship. If she didn't return in 3 days, they were commanded to sail back. Though their hearts grew heavy at the thought of leaving her behind, orders were orders, and she was no ordinary captain. With a final lingering glance, Caris stepped onto the rocky shore. The ancient forest parted around a narrow, winding path overgrown with thorny vines. The air felt thick, laden with the smell of wet earth and the faint saltiness that lingered on the breeze. Moss-laden trunks scattered flecks of sunlight onto the ground in strange, asymmetrical shapes, as if forming patterns that no ordinary human eye could interpret. Overhead, cloisters of leaves rustled with the movement of unseen creatures. For hours they pressed deeper into the island, occasionally spotting hints of archaic murals carved into stone. These engravings depicted battles between sea gods, immense, serpentine forms locked in epic struggle, and mortals kneeling on distant shores. The images cast an unsettling sense of yeovil through Caris. She recognized a story that was not unfamiliar, a mortal line cursed to roam the world's edges, at odds with the keepers of the deep. She could see in the carvings the shape of the serpentine guardian they had encountered just a night ago. At last they reached a clearing where a broken shrine loomed before them. Enormous pillars stood in partial ruin, draped in clinging vines and splitting with age. This was the realm that the earliest explorers had spoken of in hushed tones. Waves crashed in a hidden cove nearby, echoing like a heartbeat through the overgrowth. Caris bade her companions stand back and approach the shrine alone. She passed between the towering pillars to find a dais at the center. Upon its stone surface lay a massive shell marked with elaborate symbols, gods, storms, and a single mortal figure kneeling in supplication. As she placed her hand upon the shell, a powerful tremor surged beneath her feet. The shrines of old, it seemed, held more than decorative relics. A swirl of sea air breezed through the clearing, pushing the vines aside, revealing more carvings on the pillars behind. These newly exposed symbols told of a covenant. In exchange for devotion and certain sacrificial rites, the guardian of the seabed would pledge safe passage and bestow boons upon mortals bold enough to petition. But that pact had been violated by those same mortals, culminating in the family's curse. Those centuries had elapsed. Caris sensed her ancestors' guilt pressing down upon her. For so long she had wandered in pursuit of atonement. Now she stood at the threshold of that possibility. Quietly, she removed a small golden amulet from around her neck. Inscribed upon it was the symbol of her lineage, a stylized wave with two serpents intertwined. With ceremonial care, she placed it upon the stone dais beside the shell. She sank to her knees and bowed her head, an intentional reverence that all her ancestors had lacked. Words formed on her lips, an invocation drawn from texts older than the land itself. To the guardian of the deeps, to the keeper of boundaries, to the bearer of wrath, I come in humility to beg for our lineage's peace. Release us from wandering the ages. Release us from the hatred of the seas. Let me be the final child of this cursed line. The clearing grew deathly silent. Then the ground shook with renewed potency, and a low, keening sound emanated from the very air around her. The dais's shell began to radiate a faint glow that intensified until it felt like sunlight trapped in a conch. A swirl of water seeped up from the cracks in the stone, forming a circle around her knees. The energy shimmered as if alive, and Caris experienced something like an ancient presence sifting through her every memory. A swirl of voices rose, a medley of primal snarls and melodic chanting. They spoke in a language older than mortal civilization. Suddenly, she felt a pulling sensation in her chest, as if a piece of herself were being gently drawn forth. Throughout it all, she remained still, eyes closed, surrendering to the phenomenon. She sensed the hum of power recede, replaced by the hush of ordinary wind whistling through the old pillars. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. The shell had gone dark, and her amulet floated in the rippling water. She took the amulet in her hand and noticed that the wave and serpents had shifted in design, as though scorched by cosmic fire. Her landing party, standing at the clearing's fringe, darted toward her in concern. They helped her rise, fear etched in their eyes. Kyrus tried to muster words to assure them that she was well, but her body felt leaden and her mind was awash with an exultant surge. The curse's bond had not been severed, but something had changed. The old vow had been rekindled. The seas had recognized her plea. She needed to see if the Guardian would confirm the acceptance of her offering. They returned to the shore at twilight. The sea was eerily calm, the ship's hull drifting gently near the rocky outcrop. Kyrus hardly noticed the parted crowd of sailors who watched her approach. She walked to the water's edge without hesitation and placed her hand on the surface. A circle of gentle, luminescent ripples spread outward. She felt the waters stirring with an intelligence. A single shape began to rise from the deep once more, dark and colossal. The Guardian rose, luminous eyes fixed upon her, its scaled brow glistening with droplets like pearls. This time, the Guardian lowered its head toward her, letting out a subdued growl that reverberated through both wave and air. Kyrus inhaled once and began speaking in a voice that was not entirely her own. She shaped unfamiliar words, gleaned from the ancient presence within the shrine's power. The Guardian's reptilian eyes widened, and in that moment she saw reflections of the moon, the star-filled sky, and the cycles of life that had turned for millennia. For a brief span, beast and mortal were united in archaic understanding. When she finished speaking, the creature opened its maw. Its roar echoed across the archipelago valleys, shaking the trees. Fear coursed through the men behind her, but she remained steady. A wave of ocean water gushed forward, enveloping Kyrus in a misty spray. She shivered with the water's chill and brine. Then, in a motion almost delicate, the Guardian lowered its head, pressing its scaled forehead to her palm. The brush was fleeting, a silent cataclysm that sparked electricity through her veins. As quickly as it had manifested, the Guardian sank beneath the waves, leaving only columns of swirling foam. Her lungs were heavy with shock and elation. She sensed more than saw that she had reached some form of acceptance. This was a vow from the other side, an acknowledgement that her petition had been heard and that she bore within her a new responsibility, neither mortal nor divine. The first step to redeeming her ancestors had been taken, but she knew it would not be enough on its own. Time would reveal whether the gods would fully release her bloodline from the wandering curse. Kyrus turned to face her men. Those who had seen the Guardian's display of respect stared in mute wonder, uncertain whether they had witnessed a miracle or a piece of otherworldly sorcery. In the hush that followed, she gave the order to commemorate the occasion with something more tangible, dousing the deck lanterns, lighting ceremonial torches, and marking the ship's mast with the newly transformed wave serpent insignia. She explained that if the Guardian had recognized them, they must proclaim themselves as ambassadors, wishing to mend wrongdoing rather than marauders searching for profit. Early the next morning, an unexpected transformation occurred. The reef-laden channel that had so threatened the wayfarers' safe passage the day before was now much calmer. It was as though the swirling currents had slackened, and the razor-sharp reefs retracted slightly beneath the water's surface. The fog, ominous and treacherous at their approach, now parted before them like a theatre's heavy curtain. Timid rays of dawn highlighted a corridor of open sea winding into regions uncharted and possibly undiscovered by mortal maps. The question lingered. Would they press on deeper, risking unknown storms and monstrous guardians? Or would they return with proof that forging peace was possible? Though many eyes on deck pled for the comfort of returning home, Kyrus rested her gaze upon that horizon of pale light. Deep in her being, she felt the remains of the curse, still bound to her soul. But she also felt a renewed sense of belonging to these waters. A small but certain voice told her that she had been chosen to stand at the frontier between mortals and the ocean's immortal guardians. Perhaps only by granting respect where her ancestors had shown greed could she finally break the chain shackling her lineage. She steeled herself and made her choice. Her ancestors had fled their sins, trying to outrun the curse, but she determined to voyage towards salvation. With a calm clarity, she ordered the crew to weigh anchor. She explained that the real test awaited beyond the next horizon, and it was necessary to prove their sincerity to the gods. Expressions of anxiety flashed across the sailors' faces, but they followed their captain's lead. After all, this was Charis the Eternal Voyager, the woman who had seen centuries come and go, the one who had just shared communion with a sea guardian out of legend. Thus, the wayfarer set sail once more. The sense of awe, akin to stepping through a divine threshold, enveloped them. The landscape unfolded in new shapes, shattered atolls, sinuous inlets, and rocky towers rising like black spires in the gloom. The deeper they journeyed, the more Charis felt the hush of the forbidden realm cling to them. So too did she sense a subtle shift inside her, like a melody struggling to find its final chord. The curse had not dissolved, but it lay in uneasy abeyance, as though measured by each step she took toward redemption. They sailed past skeletons of ancient ships whose masts jutted from the sea like marker stones in a drowned graveyard. In passing, the wayfarer's hull brushed against drifting debris from unknown eras. Each of these images served as a caution to the crew. Yet the winds and tides themselves seemed to guide them carefully now, sparing them the brunt of danger. Evening fell without a single arrow of chaos striking them. A gentle hush blanketed the ocean, calmer than any stretch of sea they had ever known. Stars multiplied in shimmering patterns, shining like a tapestry of heavenly watches. On deck, men lit small flickering lanterns, wary of the darkness, but strangely comforted that this path did not murmur ill omens. The rhythmic lapping of water felt almost soothing. Charis leaned against the ship's railing, staring at her reflection in the dark. She traced the wave and serpent emblem on her amulet. Its lines seemed shifted into a fluid motion, reminiscent of the Guardian's graceful body. A flutter of confidence warmed her chest. She spoke inwardly to the roiling energy within, vowing she would not squander this chance the gods had laid before her. If reaching the seat of ancient power and offering them her loyalty was what it took to free her lineage, she would voyage until time itself dissolved. Behind her, a senior sailor approached. His face carried the weight of years and the lines of battle survived. He conveyed the crew's loyalty in a hoarse whisper. "We follow you, Captain, to the ends of the horizon. Be it deliverance or doom, we are yours." Charis felt words catch in her throat before finally replying in a soft voice, "Thank you, all of you." For an instant, the entire deck basked in a gentle hush, the hush of men bound by an extraordinary destiny. They had stepped into a world beyond maps, forging a path that lay outside mortal reference. The promise of either salvation or further curse hung in the very air, an invisible dividing line across the ocean's surface. Yet in Charis's steadfast gaze, there glimmered the unwavering hope of a wanderer who carried within her the fate of a storied lineage, and the will to see it redeemed. Wind now stirred the sails again, guiding the ship forward in a steady, soothing rhythm that belied the danger still lurking beyond sight. The wayfarer glided across the water without faltering, forging ever deeper into the heart of the forbidden seas, and in that quiet progression, not one among them could doubt that forces both mortal and immortal watched with solemn interest, waiting to see how this voyage would end, in long-awaited deliverance or a new chapter in an ancient condemnation. What lay ahead remained unknown, but Charis and her crew were resolved to meet every new shore with purpose and humility, trusting that, at last, the gods might bestow mercy upon a line once bound by arrogance and greed.